My car broke down on a dark road. Middle of nowhere. Phone dead. Then this young woman pulled over in an old truck. She was wearing a black and white uniform and carrying an old toolbox. She fixed my car in 15 minutes. Refused payment. Twice. Said she was already late for a catering job but couldn't just drive past someone who needed help. 20 minutes later, I walked into my own party and heard my children screaming at someone in the hallway. I went to see what was happening. It was her, the woman who just saved me, standing there covered in grease while my son and daughter tore into her in front of the entire staff, called her unprofessional, fired her on the spot. They had no idea who she'd been helping, and they had no idea what I was about to do. Let me tell you how this really started. My name is Catherine, and this is my story. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. I was driving to my own party that October evening, 72 years old and still behind the wheel of a 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. Vivian had sent me 3 emails that week about getting a newer car, something sleek, something modern, a Mercedes maybe, or one of those electric things everyone's buying now. I deleted them all. The Rolls was bought in 1972 with money from my first real contract at Warren Industrial Solutions. I designed an automated assembly system in my garage and sold it to a manufacturing plant in Hartford. The car cost more than I should have spent, but I wanted something that would last, something I could maintain myself if I had to. Turns out I was right about that. The road to my Connecticut estate winds through trees that look black once the sun goes down. No streetlights out there. Just headlights cutting through darkness and the occasional deer. I know every curve by heart. Built that house 30 years ago when the company finally made real money. Vivian and Brandon grew up there. Grew up with everything I never had. Maybe that was the problem. The engine coughed first. Then it coughed again. I felt it in the steering wheel before I heard it. The way you feel a person's heartbeat when something's wrong. Mechanical engineer for 5 decades and I still get that drop in my stomach when machinery fails. I pulled onto the shoulder and the Rolls died completely. Silent out there. Just whined in the trees and my own breathing. I popped the hood and got out. The air had that October bite to it. Cold enough to see your breath but not cold enough to call it winter yet. I grabbed the flashlight from the trunk. The emergency kit had been in there since James died 15 years ago. Jumper cables, flares, first aid supplies, no tools worth mentioning. I shined the light under the hood and confirmed what I already suspected. Fuel pump relay, classic failure point on these older models. The relay sits in an awkward spot near the engine housing. You need a bypass wire to get it running again, just temporary until you can replace the part properly. I didn't have a bypass wire. The phone in my purse was dead too. I'd meant to charge it that afternoon and forgot. 72 and still forgetting the basics. My daughter would have loved that detail. Proof I needed someone taking care of me. I stood there looking at the engine and thinking about my options. None of them good. The estate was maybe 6 miles up the road. Walking in heels wasn't happening. Flagging down a car on this stretch was a gamble. Not many people drove out here after dark. Then I saw headlights coming up behind me. An old pickup truck. Probably 20 years on it, maybe more. It slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder about 30 feet back. The engine rattled when it idled. Needed work. I stayed by the hood with the flashlight so whoever it was could see I wasn't a threat. The driver's door opened and a young woman got out. Mid-20s maybe. She was wearing a black and white uniform, the kind catering companies use. Pressed and clean. Professional. She had dark hair pulled back and she moved with purpose, not hesitation. "You need help?" she called out. "Car died," I said. "I know what's wrong, but I don't have the right tools." She walked over and looked at the engine. Really looked at it. Not the way people do when they're being polite. Her eyes went right to the fuel system. "Fuel pump relay?" she asked. I blinked. "That's right. I have tools. Let me see." She went back to her truck and returned with a metal toolbox. The kind mechanics carry. Heavy. Well used. She set it down next to the car and opened it up. Everything organized inside. Wrenches, pliers, wire cutters, electrical tape, a coil of copper wire. She pulled out what she needed and got to work. No wasted movements. She knew exactly what she was doing. I held the flashlight while she bypassed the relay, her hands steady and quick. The whole thing took maybe 15 minutes. "Try it now," she said. I got in and turned the key. The engine started, rough at first, then it smoothed out. I shut it off and came back around to where she was packing up the toolbox. "You know your way around an engine," I said. "My father taught me. He was a mechanic." Was. Past tense. "I heard that." "Well, you saved me tonight," I said. I pulled out my wallet and took out $200 bills. "Let me pay you for your time." "No, ma'am." She wiped her hands on a rag from her toolbox. "I don't take money for helping people." "You should. You clearly know what you're doing. My father taught me you help because it's right, not for profit." There it was again. Her father, teaching her things that most people don't bother with anymore. I held out the money. "At least take something. You stopped when you didn't have to." She looked at the bills and then at me. "Thank you, but no. I'm just glad I could help." Most people would have taken it. $200 for 15 minutes of work. She didn't even hesitate. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Catering job. Warren Estate, actually." She checked her watch, and I saw the worry flash across her face. "I'm already 10 minutes late. They'll probably fire me." "I hope not. I really need this job." "Warren Estate. My house. My party." "How late will you be?" I asked. "By the time I get there, 40 minutes, maybe." She closed the toolbox. "But I couldn't just drive past you. Not out here." She picked up the toolbox and started back to her truck. "Thank you again," I called after her. She turned around and gave me a small smile. "Drive safe." I got back in the rolls and waited for her to pull out first, watched her taillights disappear around the bend. Then I followed the same road toward the estate. The estate gates were already open when I arrived. Cars lined up along the circular drive. Vivian had hired valets for the evening, which seemed excessive for 20 guests. But that was Vivian. Everything had to look a certain way. I parked and went inside through the main entrance. The house was lit up like a showroom. Caterers moving through the rooms with trays, a bartender at the station in the library, string quartet playing in the corner, all of it orchestrated by my daughter. Vivian was near the entrance in a cream-colored dress. Brandon stood next to her in a tailored suit, both of them greeting guests with perfect smiles, playing host at their mother's party. I wondered if either of them knew how to change a tire. Vivian saw me and waved. "Mother, there you are. We were getting worried." "Car trouble," I said. "Someone helped me." "Oh, good. Well, come meet the Hendersons. They're thinking about investing. Always networking. Always working the angle." I shook hands with people whose names I'd forget by morning, smiled at the right moments, accepted a glass of wine I didn't drink. I set the wine glass down on a side table and looked around the room. All these people in designer clothes making small talk about market trends and vacation homes. Not one of them would have stopped on that dark road tonight. A few minutes after I arrived, I heard Vivian's voice cut through the music, sharp, angry, coming from somewhere near the kitchen corridor. The guests near me didn't notice. They were too busy discussing whether the Fed would raise interest rates again. But I noticed. I always notice when my daughter uses that tone. I excused myself and followed the sound. The service hallway connects the kitchen to the main rooms. Staff use it so guests don't see them coming and going. Vivian stood in the middle of it with her arms crossed. Brandon was next to her, and in front of them was the young woman from the road. She looked different now. Her uniform had dark stains across the front, grease on her hands. Her hair had come loose from wherever she'd pinned it. She stood very still while my daughter tore into her. "This is completely unprofessional and unacceptable," Vivian said. Her voice carried down the hall. "You show up 40 minutes late looking like you crawled out of a garage?" The head caterer hovered nearby. An older man in a white coat. "I apologize, Mrs. Warren. This has never happened before." "It shouldn't happen ever," Brandon said. He had his phone out like he was about to document evidence. "We can't have unreliable people working our events." The young woman started to speak. There was someone stranded on the road. "I don't want to hear excuses," Vivian cut her off. "You're fired. Collect your things and leave immediately." Other catering staff had stopped what they were doing, watching. Some of them looked relieved it wasn't them getting yelled at. Others just looked uncomfortable. The young woman didn't argue. didn't raise her voice. She just nodded once and said, "I understand." That's when I stepped into the hallway. "What's going on?" I asked. Vivian turned. "Mother, we're handling a staffing issue." One of the caterers showed up completely unpresentable. "There was someone stranded on the road," the young woman said. Her voice was calm, steady. "I had to help." "That's no excuse," Vivian said. "You made a commitment to this job, to our mother's party." I looked at the young woman. She met my eyes. Recognition flashed across her face. The older woman from the Rolls-Royce. "The person she helped was me," I said. The hallway went quiet. Even the kitchen sounds seemed to stop. Vivian blinked. "What?" "My car broke down on the access road." She stopped and fixed it. "That's why she's late. That's why she has grease on her hands." Brandon lowered his phone. Vivian's mouth opened and closed. The head caterer looked between all of us like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "She fixed your car?" Brandon asked. "Fuel pump relay. She diagnosed it in about 10 seconds and had it running in 15 minutes. Knew exactly what she was doing." I walked closer to the young woman. I offered to pay her. Twice. She refused both times. Vivian's expression shifted. The anger was gone. Now she just looked thrown. "We didn't know." "Of course you didn't," I said. "You were too busy firing her to ask." Brandon put his phone away. "Well, if she was helping you, that's different." "Is it?" I looked at him. "Or is it only different because it was me?" He didn't answer that. I turned to the head caterer. "She can stay. In fact, I'd like her to serve in the library. I'll be spending most of my time there tonight." The man nodded quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Warren. Whatever you'd like." Vivian touched my arm. "Mother, maybe we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss. She stays." I looked at the young woman again. "When the party winds down, come find me in the library. I'd like to talk to you." She looked uncertain. "Yes, ma'am." The catering staff scattered back to work. Vivian and Brandon exchanged a look but didn't say anything else. They went back to the main rooms where the guests were. I stayed in the hallway for a moment. The young woman was washing her hands at a service sink, getting the grease off as best she could. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved me tonight." Seemed fair to return the favor. She dried her hands and smoothed down her uniform. The stains were still there, but at least she was cleaner. I should get back to work. I nodded and let her go. The party lasted another 2 hours. I made conversation, thanked people for coming, pretended I cared about quarterly projections and board elections. All the while I was thinking about what I'd seen in that hallway. My children had humiliated someone for being late to help a stranger. They didn't know the stranger was their mother. But that wasn't the point. The point was they wouldn't have cared either way. Around 10 o'clock, the last guests filtered out. Vivian and Brandon stayed to see everyone off. The catering staff started breaking down the bar and packing up equipment. I went to the library and sat in one of the leather chairs. The room smelled like old books and wood smoke from the fireplace. It was the only room in the house I actually liked. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock on the door frame. The young woman stood there. She'd cleaned up more, fixed her hair, but she still looked exhausted. "Come in," I said. "Sit down." She hesitated, then sat in the chair across from me. Her posture was straight, hands folded in her lap. "What's your name?" I asked. "Maya Collins." "How old are you, Maya?" 24. 24. The same age I was when I started Warren Industrial Solutions. The same age I was when everyone told me I'd fail. "You said you needed this job," I said. "Why?" She took a breath. "My father's sick. Cancer. He can't work anymore. Medical bills are piling up. I work catering jobs to cover what I can." "What about your mother?" "She died when I was 8. Car accident. 8 years old and she lost her mother. Then grew up with a father who taught her how to fix engines instead of how to ask for help." "Your father taught you about cars," I said. "He was a mechanic, owned a small shop. He taught me everything." Her voice softened when she talked about him. "He's the reason I stopped tonight. He always said you help people because it's the right thing to do, not because you'll get something out of it." That's a good lesson. It's cost me more than one job. I believed that. The world doesn't reward people for having principles anymore. It rewards them for being expedient. What else did you do before catering? I asked. She looked down at her hands. I was in school, mechanical engineering, junior year at UConn. Engineering. Of course she was. Why'd you leave? Dad got diagnosed 2 years ago. Someone had to take care of him. Someone had to pay the bills. She met my eyes again. I was 1 year away from graduating. But you do what you have to do. 1 year away. She'd been that close. I sat back in the chair and studied her. This young woman who stopped on a dark road, who refused money twice, who'd given up engineering school to care for her dying father, who'd just been screamed at in my hallway and didn't scream back. I'm going to offer you something, I said, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. She waited. I need a personal assistant, someone who understands how things actually work, not just how they look, someone who won't tell me what I want to hear. I leaned forward. The job pays a real salary, full benefits, health insurance that'll cover your father, and the company will pay for you to finish your degree. 1 year of classes at night while you work during the day. Her eyes went wide. Mrs. Warren, it's not charity. I'll expect you to work, really work. But if you're willing to do that, the job is yours. She sat there processing. I could see her running through it, checking for the catch. There wasn't one. Why me? She asked finally. Because I was you, I said. 49 years ago, I was 23 years old, with nothing but a garage and an idea. People told me I'd fail. Some of them wanted me to fail. But I worked harder than anyone else and I figured things out. I paused. Tonight you chose helping someone over protecting yourself. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. She looked like she might cry. I don't know what to say. Say yes or say no. But decide tonight. I want you to start Monday if you're coming. Maya took a breath. Then she nodded. Yes, I'll do it. Thank you. Good. I stood up. Come by the office Monday morning, 9 o'clock. We'll get the paperwork started. She stood too. I won't let you down. I know you won't. She left the library, and I heard her footsteps fade down the hallway, heard the front door open and close. I sat back down and looked at the fire. I'd built Warren Industrial Solutions from nothing, spent decades turning ideas into real solutions, but Vivian and Brandon grew up with money already in the bank. They never had to fight for anything, never had to choose between paying rent and eating. They didn't understand what it took to build something. They only knew how to inherit it. But maybe I'd just found someone who understood. Maya showed up Monday morning at 8:45, 15 minutes early. She wore plain black pants and a white button-down shirt. Nothing fancy, professional. Her hair was pulled back the same way it had been that night on the road. I met her in the lobby myself. Good morning. Good morning, Mrs. Warren. She had a messenger bag over her shoulder. Probably everything she owned that mattered. I took her up to the 3rd floor where my office was. Warren Industrial Solutions occupied a building just outside Hartford. 3 floors of engineering, manufacturing, coordination, and sales. The kind of place where you could smell machine oil if you walked past the testing lab. I liked that smell. Meant people were actually making things. Your desk is here, I said, pointing to the space outside my office. You'll handle my calendar, correspondence, research, but I'm also going to give you projects, real work. I want to see how you think. Okay. She set her bag down carefully. We'll get your paperwork done this morning. Health insurance, direct deposit, all of it. You can add your father to the health plan today. Her eyes got bright for a second, then she blinked it back. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the workload. But she could handle it. I knew that already. The first few weeks were standard assistant work, scheduling meetings, fielding phone calls, organizing files that should have been organized years ago. She showed up early every day, stayed late most nights before heading to her engineering class at UConn. I gave her the first real project about a month in. One of our assembly lines was running slower than it should. Production kept making excuses, but the numbers didn't lie. Something was wrong. Figure out what's causing the slowdown, I told her. You have 2 weeks. She didn't go to the production managers. She went to the floor, talked to the workers actually running the machines, watched them for 3 full shifts, took notes. Then she came back with an analysis that showed the conveyor timing was off by 0.3 seconds, small gap, but it was costing us time on every single unit. Fix cost $2,000. Savings over the next year would be around $200,000. I approved it immediately. Vivian heard about it at the next family dinner. "Mother, you're letting your assistant make production decisions." "I'm letting an engineer solve engineering problems." "She's not an engineer," she dropped out. "She's in school, and she just saved us $200,000. What did you save us this quarter?" Vivian changed the subject. 6 months in, Maya's father died. She called me on a Tuesday morning. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion underneath. "My father passed last night. I need a few days. Take a week. Take 2 if you need them." "Thank you." The funeral was that Friday. Small service at a church in New Haven. I drove down and sat in the back row. Didn't want to intrude. There were maybe 30 people there, working people. Families who knew Daniel from the neighborhood. Maya sat in the front with some relatives. She didn't cry during the service, just sat very straight and listened to a pastor talk about her father's kindness and skill, how he'd helped half the neighborhood keep their cars running, how he'd taught his daughter everything he knew. After the service, people filed out to the cemetery. I stayed back. Didn't follow to the burial. That was private. Family. But I waited by my car in the parking lot. Maya came out about an hour later, alone. The relatives had probably left already. She saw me standing there and stopped. "You came," she said. "I did." She walked over slowly. Her face was pale, eyes red but dry. "You're not alone in this world anymore," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then her face crumpled and she started crying. Not loud, just these quiet, broken sounds. I put my arms around her and let her cry, right there in the church parking lot. When she pulled back, she wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I just keep thinking he taught me everything. How to fix things. How to be honest. How to work hard. And now he's gone, and I don't know if I did enough." "You stopped on a dark road to help a stranger even though it cost you a job. That's what he taught you. That's enough." She nodded, took a breath. "I should get back. People are probably waiting. Take care of yourself, Maya." "I will." She walked to her truck and drove away. I stood there thinking about my own mother, how I was 25 when she died, how I'd felt that same emptiness, that same fear of being untethered. Maya came back to work the following Monday. She didn't talk about her father much after that, but I noticed she started arriving even earlier, staying even later, throwing herself into work like it was the only thing holding her together. Maybe it was. By the end of the first year, she'd finished her remaining engineering coursework. Her graduation was on a Saturday in May. I bought a ticket and sat in the crowd with all the other families, watched Maya walk across that stage and accept her degree in mechanical engineering. She saw me in the crowd afterward, came over in her cap and gown with the biggest smile I'd seen from her since that night on the road. "You came," she said. "Of course I came." She hugged me, quick and spontaneous, then pulled back looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry. This feels impossible." "You earned it, because you made it possible. I gave you a chance. You did the work." I promoted her the following week, special projects coordinator, small raise, more responsibility. She started managing initiatives across departments, things that needed an engineering eye and someone who could talk to people without talking down to them. One Saturday she called and asked if she could come by my house, said she wanted to check something on the Rolls-Royce. She showed up with her father's toolbox, the same one from that night. We spent the afternoon in my garage working on the car, oil change, spark plugs, checking all the systems. She worked with confidence, knew what she was doing. We didn't talk much, just worked, handed each other tools, made small adjustments. At one point she straightened up and looked at me. "Why did you really choose me?" I set down the wrench I was holding. "What do you mean?" "That night, you could have called anyone after I left, could have hired anyone for the assistant job. Why me?" "Character, competence, willingness to do what's right even when it costs you. You showed me all of that in 15 minutes on a dark road." She thought about that. "My father used to say the same thing, said you can teach someone to fix a car but you can't teach them to care about doing it right. Your father was right." We finished the work and cleaned up. She loaded the toolbox back in her truck and waved as she drove off. Inside, I washed the grease off my hands and thought about Vivian and Brandon, how they'd grown up with every advantage, how they'd never had to work on a car or fix anything themselves, how they'd never learned that satisfaction. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I'd protected them too much. By the end of the second year, Maya had saved the company $1.2 million by renegotiating a supplier contract. She'd used engineering analysis to show we were paying 20% more than market rate for components, found a better supplier, better terms, same quality. Vivian cornered me after a board meeting. People are talking about her. Good things, I hope. They're saying you're grooming her for something. She's doing good work. She's been here 2 years, that's nothing. Then she's accomplished more in 2 years than most people do in 10. Vivian's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She just walked away. Brandon was more subtle about it. Started asking questions about Maya's background, her education, whether I was sure about her qualifications. I shut it down every time. Year 3, I promoted Maya to Director of Operations Strategy. Gave her a team of 6 people, engineers and production coordinators. She ran them well, listened to their ideas, made decisions based on data instead of ego. When a major client started making noises about leaving, I sent Maya to meet with them. Alone, no backup, sink or swim. She figured out the problem in one meeting. The client's technical team had questions our salespeople couldn't answer, engineering questions. Maya sat down with them and solved 3 months of confusion in 2 hours. The client stayed. $5 million a year, locked in for another 3 years. I introduced her to the board as invaluable to our operations. Vivian and Brandon were both in that meeting. I watched their faces, saw the jealousy starting to calcify into something harder. Maya and I fell into a rhythm. Weekly meetings became dinners at my house. We'd talk about the company, about engineering problems, about life. She told me about her childhood, about watching her father work, about losing her mother so young. I told her about building the company, about the early days, the garage, the first contracts, about proving people wrong. We were becoming something more than employer and employee, something closer to family. Vivian and Brandon noticed. I could see it in the way they looked at her during board meetings, the way they asked questions designed to make her look inexperienced. But Maya kept proving herself, and they kept resenting her for it. By year 4, Maya was running the operations department, 45 people reporting to her. She handled it well, better than some executives I'd seen with twice her experience. I made an announcement at the next board meeting. The company was creating a COO position, Chief Operating Officer, second in command. 3 internal candidates would be considered: Maya, Vivian, Brandon. The room got very quiet when I said Maya's name. After the meeting, I saw Vivian and Brandon talking in the hallway. Low voices, heads together. They stopped when they saw me coming. "Mother," Vivian said, smiled. "Good meeting." "Was it?" "Of course." She glanced at Brandon. "We should discuss the COO timeline later. Get your thoughts." They walked away together. I watched them go. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. They'd be in Brandon's office with the door closed, having lunch together when they usually ate separately, hushed phone calls that ended when I walked past. I didn't say anything, just watched. Maya came to me about 2 months later. She was leading a major client retention project, trying to keep a manufacturer from switching to a competitor. It was worth about $8 million a year. "How's it going?" I asked. "Good. The client's technical team likes what we're proposing, just waiting on budget approval to move forward." From Brandon, "Yes, he said he'd have it to me by end of week." End of week came and went. No approval. Maya followed up. Brandon said there were questions from finance, needed more documentation. She provided it. Still no approval. 3 weeks passed. The client started getting nervous. Maya worked around it as best she could, kept them engaged, kept pitching solutions, but without budget approval she couldn't finalize anything. I ran into Howard Pierce from the board at a supplier event. We were both getting coffee. "Catherine," he said, "can I ask you something about Maya?" "Of course." "Is she really ready for COO?" He looked uncomfortable. "I've heard some concerns about her experience level." "What concerns specifically?" "Just that she's only been with us 4 years. That's fast for that kind of role." He paused. "Vivian mentioned she might be in over her head." Did she? And Brandon showed me some project timelines that seemed delayed. I smiled. Thanks for bringing it to me, Howard. I'll look into it. He nodded and walked away. I checked the board minutes. 3 other members had been approached by Vivian or Brandon in the past month. Same questions, same concerns, all carefully worded. All technically reasonable. All coordinated. I went to Brandon's office one afternoon. He was at his desk working on something, budget reports spread out in front of him. How's everything in finance? I asked. Running smoothly. No issues. Good. How about Maya's budget request, the client retention project? Oh, that. Yes, I'm reviewing it. Should have it approved soon. I glanced at his desk. Could see the request sitting there. Right on top. Had been sitting there for 3 weeks. Great, I said. Client's getting anxious. Would be good to move quickly. Absolutely. I left his office. 2 weeks later, the client pulled out. Chose the competitor. Maya had done everything right, but couldn't overcome the delays. $8 million gone. She came to my office looking devastated. I lost the account. Tell me what happened. She walked through it. Every step she'd taken, every roadblock she'd hit, the budget delays that killed her timeline. I should have pushed harder, she said. Found another way. You did everything you could. It doesn't feel like enough. After she left, I sat there for a while, thinking. The next board meeting, Vivian presented the quarterly results. She went through the numbers efficiently, then got to operations. Unfortunately, we lost the Brennan manufacturing account, she said. Looked at Maya. $8 million annually. The operations team wasn't able to close the deal despite significant effort. Maya kept her face neutral, but I saw the flash of hurt. Perhaps the readiness concerns were valid after all, Vivian added, casual, like she was just making an observation. Several board members nodded. I watched Maya. Saw her sitting very straight, hands folded, taking it. She'd survive this. I knew she would. A week later, HR came to me with anonymous complaints about Maya. 3 of them, filed within 2 days of each other, all complaining about her leadership style. Too demanding, not collaborative enough, creating tension in the department. I read them carefully. The language was similar across all 3. Same phrasing, same structure. Have you verified these? I asked the HR director. We're required to investigate all complaints. Of course, keep me updated. She left. The next morning, Maya was in her office early. I could see her through the glass, working on something, probably trying to prove herself after the lost account. Vivian and Brandon were meeting in the conference room. Door closed. Planning something. I picked up my phone and called my assistant. Schedule an emergency board meeting for next month. Full attendance required. What's the agenda? COO decision. I hung up and looked out the window. Watched the employees arriving for work. All these people depending on this company. It was time to make a decision. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I got there early, set up my materials in the conference room, thick folder, a few printouts, my notes. The week before, HR had suspended Maya pending the investigation into the complaints. Standard protocol when accusations pile up like that. She wasn't allowed in the office, couldn't access her files, couldn't defend herself, just had to wait. She arrived at 9:45 looking like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking when she set down her bag. She sat at the far end of the table, away from everyone else, like she was already separate from the company. I didn't go over to her, didn't say anything reassuring, just took my seat at the head of the table and waited. The board members filtered in, 8 of them, Howard Pierce, Jennifer Lambert, the others. They nodded at me, glanced at Maya, took their seats. Vivian and Brandon came in together, both dressed perfectly. Vivian in a navy suit, Brandon in charcoal gray. They had a laptop and a presentation remote. They'd prepared something. Good morning, everyone, I said. Thank you for making time on short notice. We're here to discuss the COO position and some concerns that have been raised about Maya's performance. Vivian and Brandon have requested time to present their findings. We'll hear from them first. Vivian stood up, clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up with a title slide. Critical Leadership Assessment, VP Operations Performance Review. Professional, clinical, Like this was just standard business. Thank you, Mother, Vivian said. We bring these concerns forward with respect for Maya's efforts, but we have a responsibility to the company. She clicked to the next slide, a timeline of Maya's projects over the past year, several marked in red. As you can see, there have been multiple project failures and delays. The Brennan manufacturing account, the supplier transition that ran over budget, quality control issues in the new assembly line. Brandon stood up next to her. Tag team presentation. The financial impact has been significant, he said. Clicked to a slide showing numbers. Between lost revenue and cost overruns, we're looking at approximately $12 million in negative impact over 18 months. One of the board members shifted in his seat. Another took notes. Maya sat very still, staring at the table. We've also received multiple complaints from employees, Vivian continued. Anonymous reports citing unprofessional behavior, unrealistic demands, and poor communication. She showed examples, quotes from the complaints, made them sound damning. This is difficult for us, Brandon said, looked around the room, made eye contact with each board member. Maya has potential, but the evidence suggests she's not ready for this level of responsibility. He paused. Let that sink in. Given the financial impact and the pattern of failures, we recommend immediate termination for cause. The room got quiet. A few board members looked at Maya. She still hadn't moved. However, Vivian said, smiled slightly, we also need to think about next steps. The company needs strong operational leadership. Here it comes, I thought. I've spent 15 years building our brand and market presence, Vivian continued, grown our visibility by 40%, established relationships with key industry partners. Operations needs that kind of strategic vision and proven track record, Brandon nodded. And I've managed our finances for 10 years, maintained fiscal discipline, ensured stability. The COO role requires someone with that steady, reliable approach. They weren't just trying to fire Maya. They were positioning themselves against each other. Both wanted the role. Both thought this presentation proved they deserved it. Jennifer Lambert spoke up. Maya, do you want to respond to any of this? Maya looked up. Her face was pale. The budget delays. Her voice shook. Those weren't my responsibility. I submitted requests on time. They sat in finance for weeks. Because they required additional documentation, Brandon said smoothly, which wasn't provided until much later. That's not true, Maya said. I provided everything you asked for. The record shows otherwise. Maya opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't have the documents to prove it, didn't have the evidence. She looked at me, desperate, pleading. I kept my face neutral, took notes. Her shoulders slumped. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Maybe I'm not ready for this level. She'd given up, right there, in front of everyone. Howard Pierce cleared his throat. Given these concerns, perhaps termination is the prudent path forward. A few other board members nodded. Maya looked like she might cry, but was holding it together. Vivian and Brandon exchanged a glance, quick, satisfied. They thought they'd won. I set down my pen. The sound seemed loud in the quiet room. That was a thorough presentation, I said. Looked at my children. You clearly put a lot of work into it. Vivian smiled. We felt the board needed complete information. Absolutely. I pulled the folder closer. May I share some observations before we vote? Of course, Jennifer said. The other board members nodded. I opened the folder, took out the first document, set it on the table where everyone could see. I've been doing some research too, I said. For the past 18 months, actually. About the same time these problems started appearing. Vivian's smile faltered slightly. I pulled out a spreadsheet, projected it on the screen behind me. This is a timeline of budget approvals in Brandon's department, from January of last year through last month. I clicked to highlight one column. These are Maya's requests. You'll notice they took an average of 5 weeks to approve. I clicked to another column. These are budget requests from other departments. Same time period. Average approval time, 3 days. Brandon shifted in his seat. Different projects require different levels of review. Do they? I pulled out another document. Here are the budget request forms Maya submitted. I had our finance team review them independently. They found 0 issues, no missing documentation, no incomplete information. Every form was perfect. I let that sit for a moment. So why did they take 5 weeks to approve while others took 3 days? No one answered. I pulled out more documents. Now let's talk about the Brennan manufacturing account, the one Maya supposedly lost through poor performance. I showed emails, timeline, documentation. Maya had the client ready to sign, everything negotiated, everything approved on their end. The only thing missing was budget approval for the implementation plan. She requested it 8 weeks before the deadline. Brandon approved it 2 days after the deadline. The client couldn't wait. They went with the competitor. Jennifer looked at Brandon. Is this accurate? There were complications, he said. Questions that needed answering. What questions? I asked. I have the request here. It's complete. Our CFO at the time reviewed it and found no issues. Brandon didn't answer. I pulled out more papers. Now about those anonymous complaints. I set them on the table. 3 complaints, filed within 48 hours, all using similar language, similar phrasing, same sentence structures. I showed them the comparison, highlighted the matching phrases. Our HR director ran a linguistic analysis. The complaints were likely written by the same person, or copied from a template. Vivian's face had gone white. I also checked with Maya's team, I continued. All 45 people she manages, asked them directly about her leadership. Want to know what they said? I pulled out the summary. 92% rate her as excellent or outstanding. They described her as fair, knowledgeable, and supportive. Several said she's the best manager they've ever had. I looked at Vivian. Doesn't quite match those anonymous complaints, does it? The room was completely silent. I pulled out one more document, the big one. For the past 18 months, I've been tracking something. Every interaction, every delay, every whisper campaign. I have emails, phone records, meeting notes, board member testimonies about conversations they had with you both, client contacts who reported unusual calls. I spread the documents across the table. Let everyone see. 47 documented instances of interference, budget delays, false reports to board members, whispered concerns, anonymous complaints, all of it targeted at one person, Maya. I looked at my children. They were frozen, caught. You spent 18 months sabotaging her, creating obstacles, making her look incompetent, and she still succeeded. 10.4 million in value creation, 95% success rate on projects that didn't face mysterious delays, employee satisfaction scores through the roof. Brandon tried to speak. We were protecting the company's interests. Were you? I looked at him. Or were you protecting your inheritance? Vivian stood up. Mother, you're taking this out of context. Sit down, Vivian. She sat. I turned to the board. I'm going to make a motion, and then I'm going to explain exactly why I'm making it. I pulled out one final document, the employment contracts my attorney had prepared. I moved to appoint Maya as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately, with a clear succession plan to CEO in 3 years. The room erupted. Brandon shot to his feet. She's not even family. We were protecting what's ours. Protecting? I looked at him. You spent 18 months sabotaging someone who was doing her job. That's not protection, that's fear. She earned nothing, Vivian said. Her voice had gone sharp. You handed her everything. I gave her a chance. She did the work. There's a difference. I looked at both of them. You inherited your positions. She earned hers. The board members were watching silently. All in favor? I asked. 8 hands went up. Every board member. Opposed? Vivian and Brandon kept their hands down, faces white. Motion carries unanimously, I said. Maya sat frozen, tears running down her face. She wasn't making a sound, just crying. I turned back to my children. You're both removed from your executive positions, effective immediately. You'll be reassigned to middle management. You can't do this, Vivian said. I own controlling shares. I can do exactly this. We'll resign, Brandon said. You can, but you'll forfeit all severance, every stock option, every benefit. I pulled out the contracts I'd had prepared. Or you can sign 3-year contracts, middle management positions, report to people who report to Maya, learn what actual work looks like. Your choice. I slid the contracts across the table. Your lifestyles require money, I said. Your houses, your cars, your club memberships. You're both leveraged to the limit because you thought you'd always have executive salaries. You need this income, so you'll either stay and learn, or you'll leave with nothing and figure out how to survive. They stared at the contracts. Trapped. I gave you everything, I said. Money, education, opportunity, everything except hardship, everything except struggle. You never learned that success is earned. That character matters more than connections. I stood up, walked around the table to where Maya sat. You have 3 years, I said to Vivian and Brandon. Prove you can learn, prove you can grow, or leave. But either way, this company's future isn't yours anymore. I looked at Maya. Stand up. She stood, shaking. Your father Daniel would be proud of who you've become, I said. I know I am. Welcome, Chief Operating Officer. She broke down. Really broke down. I pulled her into a hug and let her cry. Right there in front of the board. In front of my children. In front of everyone. You're my daughter now, I said quietly. In every way that matters. Biology is just genetics. Family is what you choose, what you earn, what you build. She held on to me and cried harder. The board members started leaving, giving us space. Vivian and Brandon sat there staring at the contracts. Eventually they picked them up and walked out without signing, but they'd be back. They needed the money too much. Maya pulled back, wiped her eyes. I don't understand. You knew, this whole time? About 18 months. Why didn't you stop them? Because I needed to see who you really were when things got hard. And I needed to see who they really were when they thought they could get away with it. I paused. You chose to keep working. Keep trying. Keep doing the right thing even when everything was stacked against you. They chose sabotage and lies. That told me everything. She took a shaky breath. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned this. Every bit of it. She smiled through the tears. My father would have liked you. I think I would have liked him too. We left the conference room together, started walking toward her office. Our offices. She was COO now, second in command. There's a lot to do, I said. You'll need to restructure reporting lines, set up your team, start planning for the transition. I know. She wiped her eyes again. I'm ready. I know you are. 18 months later, I stood in the design studio looking at the plans for our new facility expansion. Maya was next to me, pointing at something in the blueprints. If we modify the workflow here, she said, we can increase efficiency by 15%. Show me. She traced the path with her finger, explained the engineering behind it, the automation systems, the robotics integration, revolutionary stuff, things I never would have thought of. The company was thriving. Stock up 18% since she took over as COO. Employee satisfaction at record highs. 3 new contracts worth a combined $20 million. Vivian had left after 2 years. Couldn't take working under Maya. Couldn't handle the humiliation. She'd found a job at a competitor for half her old salary. Brandon stayed. Slowly learned to do actual work. Earned back some respect. He'd never be an executive again, but he'd become competent, reliable. Maybe that was enough. Maya looked up from the blueprints. What do you think? I think you're ready for what comes next, which is CEO. 2 more years, then it's yours completely. She smiled. I learned from the best. We stood there looking at the plans. 2 engineers, 2 women who'd built themselves from nothing. 2 people who understood that character and competence matter more than blood or money. And now I had someone to leave it to who understood what it meant. Who understood why it mattered. Not because she was my daughter by birth, because she'd become my daughter through respect and shared values. Some families are born, some are built. Both can matter, but only one of them was ready to run this company. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Was I too harsh forcing my children to work under Maya, or did they need to learn that lesson? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like mine.